All right, so we promised all of you that we would be back sooner than later, and here we are. So it's sooner. And today we're going to be talking about like everything Strava. So Strava had a really big year, I think, this year. I mean, they came out with a lot of stuff. They announced their new CEO. They have a whole lot of new features like dark mode, privacy features, and whatnot. But I don't know. I think they've been making a little bit of news lately that maybe is on the opposite end of the scale. What do you think?
Yeah, they were doing so good. It was like such a strong performance, right? And then you know that like the video clip where you see that the guy's out ahead in the race, right? And he's about to cross the finish line and he celebrates like this and he crashes the bike at the last second, right? I feel like
That's right.
that's Strava right now. Like they were doing so good, and then it has all properly gone down the crapper in the last like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I have got to the point where this is probably a big deal. I have stopped using Strava for creating routes. Unusable for me. We'll get to all the problems with Strava in the last 2 weeks, and I feel like we can only really cover like a fraction of them because there are so many problems, and we're gonna have to kind of pick like the top 5 or 6
Yeah.
things to vent about.
Creating routes is probably it's probably the number one problem I'm having right now. So for those of you on YouTube, you may notice that I'm actually not in my studio right now. So I'm actually doing this kind of like fall road trip, cycling trip to test a bunch of things as well as just check out like the fall colors, which are really popping right now in Colorado. But yeah, in terms of so anyways, I apologize if the video or audio quality is a little bit off there, but yeah, in terms of creating routes, it's been kind of tough. So yeah, I guess I don't know, like what do you want to tackle first on this kind of big list of things that we have here?
We could start with routes, or we can go do all sorts of things. Your choice. It's dealer's choice. We got like a solid 6 things. We do have some positive Strava news in here. We got one item that's positive that we can talk about, but I feel like that could be like an intermission, right? Like that's like we take a breather in between all the bad news.
I think let's just go ahead and start with routes, I think, first.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
so yeah, it was funny, like about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. So I created a route to go, funny enough, back up to the Gold Hill General Store to go get another one of the cookies, right?
Yeah,
And
that's good
yeah,
stuff.
so Ray got to experience that about 2 months ago when he was visiting me out in Colorado. And yeah, I just like kept on clicking on this one particular section of road to, I just wanted to do a little bit of a different route to the general store. And it just like routed me straight through the forest, like on this completely random road that it made no sense at all. And then funny enough, later that day, it was you that texted me and you're like, yeah, so have you been noticing anything odd going on with route creation? So what was your experience with it so far?
So I've been having all sorts of problems. I think my first obvious problem when I was creating this 50 or so K hike, and so it was marked as a hike / trail run, and I was down to like the last couple K where I was trying to get back down to the beach, and should have been like super straightforward through a town, like just done. And it starts like routing me in these really weird routes. And I'm like, why is it doing that? Like this is like a 2-block connection. It's all I got to do is 2 blocks straight across, and it would route me like 5 blocks in a giant circle. And I'm like, what are you doing? And the more I played with it, like I got to the point of impossibility. It was like just trying to play like with a mouse or something. Like just the mouse kept running away from you. You're like, what's going on here? So eventually I went into manual mode, and keeping in mind that Des and I, like, we create a lot of Strava routes. Like I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't create at least 1 or 2 Strava routes on. And so I'm pretty like understanding of all the little occasional quirks, like the stuff that you might see, if you do a lot of routes, but this was just completely bonkers. So I shot you a note, and I shot Shane Miller, GP Llama, a note, and I'm like, you guys have seen this? And Shane's like, yeah, actually there's a guy that's just mentioned this on the Escape Collective Discord of having kind of similar like weird little quirks. They just can't make these routes connect. So I look at that, take a look at it, post a comment there, and a couple of people are like, yeah, this is the problem. And I see some threads on Reddit about it. So with all this like pile of stuff, I go back to Strava and I'm like, hey, this is now almost 2 weeks ago. I'm like, hey, what's going on? I'm seeing some weird stuff here, like really basic stuff I can't complete. And I gave another couple examples of some gravel rides and just some simple routes where I just could not connect point X to point Y, and they were just a few hundred meters away from each other on the same route. Like in cases of gravel, sometimes, gravel's obviously mostly gravel, but sometimes it's road, right? You just have to get on the road for something because that's only two connector points. And it would go, and like for a 100-meter section where I'm like, I just need to be on the road, it would go and add like 4 kilometers to find gravel somewhere else. And I'm like, no, I need to go between these 2 points 100 meters away. So I shot Strava note. I'm like, hey, this all happened like, at that point now, a week prior to my note. And I'm like, this started, what's the deal here? And like, oh, let's start digging into it. And this is via their PR person. They've kind of like outsourced PR now, like a third party company or whatever. But nonetheless, I started getting all this information. I give them routes, I give them screen recordings, I get all this. And it kind of goes silent. So I poke again like last week now. So now we're basically a week and a half or so after I initially poked, and no progress at all. And it's gotten to the point where in the last few days, like I was creating some routes for myself and my wife for this road ride, and I literally gave up. For the first time ever, I completely gave up and just said, you know what, I'm making this on Komoot. And I went and created my route on Komoot, and tapped my way through it. And I use Komoot a lot for like referencing, double checking things, especially like in backcountry Europe stuff, but I don't tend to use it for road riding of all things. And I just had to give up and had to start using Komoot for my routes lately.
So in terms of like route creation, do you often use Ride GPS as well? Because that's the other one that I use in addition to Komoot and Strava. And I'll use Garmin Connect as well.
Yeah, no, I haven't used Ride with GPS very often. I use Garmin Connect as well occasionally for things. I just tend to like to use either Strava or Komoot, mostly so they're device agnostic, because as you and I know, like we've got a lot of devices. You may be testing a Wahoo device, a Garmin device, a Hammerhead device all in one shot, and this sort of like normalizes it across the board, so I don't have to worry about it.
Totally.
But no, I haven't tried.
No, so I have found that my routes around here, some of them have been actually pretty good, but yeah, some of them still just have some really, really odd quirks where it just kind of routes me off in a random ass direction, quite frankly. So I'm not really sure. I just checked the forums actually, and well, I guess there's a couple of things. We'll loop to the forums here in a second, but
you have you?
It doesn't look like there's any update on a resolution for the route creation problem at this point. Have you been checking like Reddit and whatnot as well in terms of like the experience other people have been having?
Yeah, and no one's got a solution at this point. It's all just kind of like, it's just weirdness. And some people have speculated, some people that are really good with mapping from like a behind the scenes tech standpoint, speculated that Strava's broken something on how you connect roads together. So basically, like I call like connectors apparently on the underlying map set. And they've broken something where roads that should show as being connected aren't, and thus it's now routing all sorts of wonky ways. And maybe we'll overlay, so I did some screen recording videos for this podcast ahead of time, just to show people that are on YouTube how crazy some of these route suggestions are, because they will defy logic. Like you're just like, no, why would you ever? It's kind of the routes like when you're trying to add mileage, you would create these sort of routes. You're like, oh, I need an extra 1 kilometer. How do I get an extra 1 kilometer? Strava's like, hold my beer, I'll give you an extra 1 kilometer.
No, yeah, it's funny. I don't know. It's a bit scary just because, I mean, Strava's route creation tools have been, very solid from our experience with it. And, a lot of times too, in terms of the actual suggested routes, they're good as well. Did you actually test the suggested routes as well as manual route creation? Because that's actually one thing I haven't tested yet, are the like suggested routes, to see if those are broken or not.
I have looked at some, but lately I've been trying to go in certain directions, so I haven't done as many suggested routes lately.
Okay.
But I have seen some
week.
Stuff, suggested routes where it's been giving me very much gravel routes for road lately, quite a bit. And even like route connecting stuff where it's been doing that quite a bit lately. But I'm not sure, to be fair to Strava, if in this case, it's just the area that I've been in quite a bit that's having, like, just has bad underlying data on some of this stuff, right?
Sure,
So here's a question for you, a slight tangent to that, as I was on this ride the other day.
Yeah.
So if you have a ride on Strava and you've planned it as a gravel ride in that you are bringing your gravel bike and there are, let's say, a third of it's gravel, but 2/3 of it is pavement. What do you tag the ride as at the end?
I tag that as a gravel ride. Yeah, it's very much like if I were to go hiking, but I run downhill, I'll still tag that as a trail run just because, I think that will throw off segments and whatnot. And we'll talk about segments as well here in a little bit.
Yep.
But so yeah, no, for me, I would tag that as a gravel ride. So why do you ask?
Well, I was pondering this as I was on my ride, and I would tag it as gravel as well. My thinking there being that for that 1/3 that is gravel, and this was very legit gravel, I don't want Strava to eventually think, if enough people go on this, that it's a road cycling route, right? Which is how I wondered if some of the routes near where I was in was causing this issue, where enough people have given up on tagging that as gravel and were like, yeah, this little section here it's good enough, right?
Sure.
So,
anyways, that's a good point. I don't know. The issue I generally have with gravel is when I put that into Strava, often, or not oftentimes, a lot of the time, it'll suggest mountain bike trails in there.
Oh yeah,
and that's more my issue with the gravel designation, is that it gets really cloudy in terms of like what it's actually classifying as that. Like, where were we?
everywhere.
I can't remember where we were at, but
that's where we've been.
Yeah, we have definitely been on. Yeah, we're like, this isn't gravel. so yeah. But
yeah, the Dolomites. I'm thinking we had some of those moments. We had some of those moments in Tenerife. We had some of those moments in southern Spain. We've had some. Some of those Uncle Strava going gravel rogue moments quite a bit, actually.
Oh man, that's taking the spirit of gravel a little too far. Yeah, for sure. So probably a good moment to talk about maybe the forums in terms of the feedback that people cannot give at this point. Basically, at this point, the forum or Strava's hub is read only. So you can't even like suggest anything or provide any feedback. And I think the latest one was, it was basically because they're dealing with a sustained campaign of inauthentic content posted to their platform. Which
that's
could
two different things.
Could be true, right? Or is it two different things?
Yeah. So there's two different things there. They've kind of tried to intertwine together, but aren't really the same.
Okay.
So there's the whole inauthentic content piece, which we'll get to in just a second. But as tied into the same moment, they made some changes that impact that. They closed the community hub. And so the community hub, as you noted, is read-only. That's what you and I would call the Strava forums. Strava calls the community hub. And it's where you could post a question and complain, and maybe someone from Strava would respond back to you and give you an answer that may be helpful or maybe not. But at least you could talk to other people, right? It was one place that you can go to, and other people can maybe post solutions and workarounds and things like that. At the same time, all of these changes we're about to talk about today happened. Strava decided to put the entire thing into read-only, which means that you can't post any more complaints. So if you had a problem or a question or anything, it's over. Like you can't do anything anymore.
It's kind of funny that you really can't go submit your feedback at this point. So I think, at this point, it's going to be either like Twitter or Reddit or something like that, where you're going to see, a few more of those ongoing updates. Good.
So I went back to Strava and I'm like, hey, I said, it seems like turning the community hub into read-only mode only actually serves to silence everyone. What am I missing here? And they responded back with their external PR person saying, understand, and luckily this is only a temporary issue while we migrate the community hub platform. We are working with many groups and community members to ensure that when the new platform is implemented, it services clubs in the best way possible. So they were then mixing up two different issues. But either way, the community hub as a concept, the forums are gone. So then I responded back with now 4 days ago. Is there a timeline for the community hub to this new platform they're talking about? Are we talking days, weeks, months, anything? And nothing at all. So they've dealt with the problem by just making the problem not accessible. Like
so
like what?
So I think so. They have some important dates on here. Did you see this latest post? So They have important dates. So the read-only mode, starting now, the forum will be read-only. Forum unavailable. In late October, the forum will be temporarily unavailable as we complete the upgrades to our new experience. Date to be determined. Estimated it's October 24th is what they actually said. So
the return of it or the permanent death of it, because it's already early October and it's dead.
No. So basically, yeah. So it says forum unavailable, and then completing upgrades to the new experience, and then the date is to be determined. But it does say estimated October 24th, and will be updated here in this particular forum post. I'll just go ahead and screenshot this right now and go ahead and have it on the screen. So yeah. So basically, I guess October 24th is maybe when they're gonna have a lot of the things fixed that we're gonna be talking about.
Just to clear, when they're gonna fix the things, or when they're gonna go ahead and bring back the forums so we can complain about them. That's the
coincidentally. Okay, so that's the forums. I guess maybe we should flip over to that other portion of it too, in terms of the inauthentic content, because I think that's actually pretty important, because there's a lot of spam and stuff that can happen there. So and again, I think you dove into this one a little bit more than I did.
Yep. So these were all these rabbit holes I just kept on going down. As I started asking questions, I got more answers that just generated more questions. And so the thing that actually people complained about the most, that to my comments or my comments inbox, whatever, if you will, is that Strava has stopped allowing allowing links at all be pasted into any portion of anything on the Strava platform, whether it be the description field, whether it be anything else. And it was worse at first. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever, it was the pinnacle of worse, because they even broke links to Strava.com. So if you wanted to, if you posted a community note with a Strava.com route, it would reject it. So it just silently kills it, is all it does. You can type in, whatever you want, and it immediately just simply whacks it as soon as you hit save every single time. So that was annoying, especially for clubs that are like, oh, hey, here's the route for today, right? If you didn't actually use the club route functionality for any number of reasons, you posted a link to Strava routes, that broke. So they fixed that, so you could at least link to other people's Strava profiles and routes and stuff like that now, but you can't link to anything else on anywhere else at all. So any link on the interwebs is now whacked on Strava.com in any way, shape, or form in the app, etc. And I understand why they would do this in the general sense of things. Mainly they're trying to reduce bot spam. I'm sure at some point you have seen, anyone on Strava has seen various spam stuff, most of it adult in nature, that is trying to get you to go somewhere. And this reduces that. And I'm on board with that to an extent, but I think there's a limit there. One, spam bots aren't doing paid Strava accounts, right? So you could certainly allow paid Strava members to post links.
Good idea.
You could allow clubs to post links, right? There's a ton of reasons why clubs might post information about an event, for example, and that just simply cannot fit in the little text box of the Strava community page. Which, by the way, fun, as I was researching this whole thing, I created a club for DC Rainmaker. And I was like, I just want to double check all these things people are saying, right? And about clubs and stuff like that. And so I immediately hid the club within 20 seconds of me creating it, right? I set it as private. I learned that when you do that, when you create a Strava club, when you join a club in particular. So when I join a club, it puts it on my activity feed on Strava, which means every single person who's following me sees that I've joined that club. And fun fact, there's no way to remove that at all. I even texted with someone to Strava, or a former Strava, and confirmed this. There's no way to remove their notification to your followers that you've joined a club, period. You just can't do it. So the problem then is now I have however many it is, 2,000 plus people that have seen that and tried to join the club. And I was not mentally ready to host a club. I don't even know what the club's going to be about. I just created a club. I stuck a picture there, and I was like, I'll have a club. I'll be private, right? It's a good thing I didn't name it something even more silly, right? I could have named it Baguette Hunters or whatever, right? And that would be even more confusing.
That's a private club.
But nothing is private. So
that's true. That's true.
So anyways, back to this whole original point here, is that they kill the links, And I don't think they really thought this through entirely, especially for clubs, right? I think there's a lot of scenarios. I mean, if you go back to, a couple years ago when they added community posts, right? And the idea that you could link out to other things that were maybe interesting. You wrote a big long post, a race report, etc. You want to include photos, you want to include a link to maybe more about it, whatever the case is, you can't do that. And Strava has numerous times talked about wanting to be a social media platform, right? They talk about themselves as like the social media platform for athletes and things like that. Every social media platform I know of allows you to post links to the outside world, right? That's the, trying to be more social. I don't know.
I understand the problem that they were trying to fix, but it sounds like they just went with a global solution, without necessarily thinking this through, and they're kind of, fixing a lot of that problem right now. It's like, they're slowly adding stuff back in. Now, wasn't there also an issue with people like actually putting numbers in their titles or activity titles or something like that, where those were breaking things as well?
Yep. So as part of this attempt to kill off links, they made it so anyone put a number in there. Like if you put in 5.2 kilometers, like type in type in 5.2 km into your Strava title, it would zap that as well. So it would zap anything with a period and a numeral after it. Like it's just super sloppy coding practices. So people,
it's like literally, it's like a regular expression is, the term in the programming world, where they're just like, they're looking for a dot whatever. And like, that's basically what they're doing. Oh my gosh, that's so hilarious.
So a lot of people, and the funny thing about Strava titles, right? And Strava themselves, again, has talked about make your titles entertaining, make them creative, make them whatever you want, right? So people make them creative, they make them entertaining, and sometimes people put the distances of their run in the Strava title. Sometimes people put all sorts of numerical things in their titles, right? Like run number 312, number whatever, right? And all that stuff got zapped, right? So sometimes people put like NO dot 3112 would be number 3112, right? Then different cultures express things different ways. It was just super sloppy. I have not double checked yet again today to see if that's been unbroken or fixed or whatever. There were some changes there to some things, but not everything. Either way, it's just like a whole collection of a flotilla of broken stuff the last few weeks, which then gets us to October 2nd.
Wait, what happened October 2nd?
They permanently killed off FatMap. So
that's right. Yeah.
Yes, a moment of silence for FatMap.
And
dead.
they just like recently acquired them too.
Yeah, like maybe 2 years ago, and they brought in a few. Yeah, they brought in a few things. They acquired FatMap. They took their beautiful Chamonix office, brought in the people, and they were really excited about all that. But at the end of the day, they've taken very little of FatMap, and some of FatMap stuff was definitely unique when it initially started, and these days a lot of it is in other places. I think the thing that people are mostly complaining about is some of the stuff around avalanche risk reports and whatnot that FatMap would do, looking at slope angles in the backcountry and that area, which Strava hasn't pulled in, and there are only a few other companies out there that do that, but they're part of more complex subscription services, and so it is a bummer that Strava killed that off without really doing much with it, other than, I guess, removing a competitor, if you will. But it's so definitely a lot of people there upset about that. Now, before we get on to the next problem, if you will, we got some good stuff, which is that Precision has once again sponsored this episode of the Fit File. Precision's been sponsoring the Fit File since our relaunch, really, quite a long time, in fact, right? I think since the very beginning. But more importantly than that, they've been also what I've been using as my fueling, myself as well as my wife, on all of my silly adventures, including my 50-kilometer or so hike that I did a couple days ago, my ride that we're going to talk about, or we already talked about, in terms of the disaster for the routing on that, like all that stuff powered by Precision Fuel and Hydration. But not just us, but also Tour de France teams on both the men's and the women's side, Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, etc. In fact, one of the cool things that they've introduced more recently is these race stickers. Basically, they're stickers that you can go ahead and put on anything you want, including your stem, your hydration kits, etc., allowing you to go ahead and pace and figure out both your hydration and nutrition products. This is something we saw from the men's and women's Tour de France teams, and now you can add it yourself or create it yourself using these little kits. And then from a product standpoint, all their products are Informed Sport certified. All of them are vegan. All of them are 2-to-1 glucose fructose and contain no artificial ingredients. And as I always mention, all of them are totally edible. Even in the middle of that 12-hour hike, I had no problems consuming precision stuff. Because once again, Des, I had no food on that hike outside of, like, I just was in no man's land on that. So it was purely precision stuff until I got a Fanta in the last, 5K. I found a little shack that had a Fanta. So that was, the most exciting part of my day right there. Once again, thanks to Precision Fuel and Hydration for sponsoring this episode. You can get 15% off your first order with coupon code FITFILE, and you can see the links down the bottom there as well.
Let's talk about some of the more the enhancements. And, I'm going to use the air quotes here with the enhancements. So we have some new features that you probably have noticed that are rolling out to lots of Strava subscribers and Strava athletes. So there's a new quick edit feature. So that's going to be something where when you upload your ride, it'll just have this little quick edit screen that comes up where it lets you edit just the kind of more important details, I guess you could say, of your activity. There's some new AI features that are also rolling out. Those have actually been kind of reserved for some a little tighter beta group that it was announced, I think, back at the Strava Bandcamp earlier this year. So those AI features. And then I'm not sure about if this is an enhancement or not, but the homepage or the home screen ordering of your friends' activities, that certainly changed a bit. And then there's also a bit of leaderboard cleanup, and that's actually really nice to see. So I guess let's maybe just talk about that quick edit feature really quick.
Yep.
So this one, it is nice where I think it lets you edit your title, your description, and add a photo just really quick on the snap. I tend to find it a little intrusive, I guess you could say.
Yes,
where,
that's the word. I agree. I couldn't put my finger on it, but that's exactly it.
Yeah. So basically, it'll when you finish your ride, when you open up Strava, it's just a screen that pops up really quick. I get that for sure, but sometimes I kind of just want to go on Strava, not necessarily to edit my own activity, but just to check out what my friends are doing. So it's it's a little annoying for it to come up immediately. But then there's kind of another phase of annoyance that's really only applicable to you and I. So yeah, maybe you explain. And
So Des and I, when we go out for a run or ride, we take with us 12 devices, right? And so we upload 12 things, and this little quick edit thing pops over. But when it pops up, you can't see which device is the device that you used, or much other details about it. So for me,
it'll show the company name. It'll show Garmin or Wahoo, but it doesn't show the specific device. It'll say latest Garmin activity. That's yeah. Okay.
So you basically, from you and I, we usually, at least for me, sometimes I just choose whatever wins a Strava race as the one that I publish. Sometimes I publish a certain one based on something I'm trying to demonstrate, or sometimes if I've got a bunch of activities, maybe one of them died along the way and I don't want to publish that one. I want to choose which one I want to use. But point is, now I've got this popover that I got to get rid of. That's just kind of one more thing. I think that the challenge with I like the concept of the quick edit. To me, they're halfway there, but I'd rather, as opposed to right now, it's modal in the sense that it pops over the top of the screen and you can't get rid of it, which I think it's a good reminder to be there, but I wish it would just sort of hover down at the bottom or something until you either dismissed it, but I could still use the rest of Strava, right? I wish I could still use other things of Strava, as opposed to being kind of forced on me there.
I think it probably wouldn't have affected us or emotionally as much if we didn't have our sports tech problem of uploading 6 activities. But it's this thing where when we go into Strava, it's this pop-up. All right, dismiss. Then the next one pops up. Then the next one pops up. So I think a solution needs to be looked at there in terms of kind of like what you were talking about, some sort of in between there. Because again, concept wise, I think it's really, really good. But I think the quickest thing is just to have a toggle in your settings to just turn that off. That's, I think, the easiest solution personally. So, so yeah. And I think that brings us maybe to homepage ordering of activities. So this is something I noticed, I think maybe about a week or two ago. And this was related to actually the quick edit feature where, the quick edit popped up. I dismissed it. And then I saw my homepage and it had like all my activities, my 6 of them for that one activity. And then I went to go refresh it, and then it was kind of like they just like took all the activities and like shook them in a bag, and then here you go again. And then it's basically, it's almost like when you're on YouTube and you want to like refresh the page to see like different suggestions and stuff like that. It's almost that sort of like theory now, where it's like, no, how about you see Mike's activity now, or here's how you see Shane's activity now. It's like it's kind of this weird, I have no idea what type of ordering they're doing in here now, where this is drastically different than what it was like a month or two ago.
So like I have mine set for chronological. Is your chronological toggle not chronological anymore?
Well, so I specifically don't have it chronological because I kind of want to see what it particularly does. So from what I've heard, the majority of people on Strava don't use the chronological ordering. They use the, So, I specifically do it this way just because I want to see the experience of it. But yeah, it is like this like gigantic, like, put everything in a bag and shake it up and see what comes out. So
yeah, it's funny that actually, so that piece there, I was down another rabbit hole around, so all of my activities by default are private, just like yours, right? Meaning that everything that goes into Strava is automatically private across the board, and then you and I toggle to public the actual thing we want the world to see. So of like all the activities that I do on any given day, let's say there's, I don't know, 10 Strava uploads per day across all the things we do, then one might get uploaded, right? But like my ride I just finished, I might upload it, I might not. I was out just capturing some video stuff, so it's not really a very exciting ride. I may not toggle it to Strava. But it was interesting. So I was down this rabbit hole about how they show in the algorithmic feed activities when you toggle them from private to public. And there is an entire ordering there. So I always assumed that, because this is based on data of doing this a lot, in that let's say we did a ride yesterday and I set it now from private to public, I've historically noticed that the ride from yesterday will get far fewer engagements, so likes, comments, etc., than a ride I just toggle right now. So I assume that was because it went further down the list. But according to Strava, that is theoretically not true. According to Strava, the only thing that matters is the time that you toggle it to public, not the time that that activity was done, which I am putting my solid BS flag down on, because based on all of the data I have, which is years of toggling activities from private to public, in every case, if it's more than like 8 hours old, you get almost no comments. No matter how epic it was, right? No matter how amazing this was, it just gets like flushed down the toilet.
No, I would have to agree with you on that as well, is that I think there is some chronological element in there. It's not necessarily just doing the private or not. And, at the same time too, it's like maybe some of those people have their feeds sorted by time at that point too. So maybe that's why they just don't see it too. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there's probably two sides of the coin there. So for me, what's interesting is that for my, like, whoever wins the Strava race, I actually, I'm pretty detailed about it, where I'll usually like download all my files. I'll look at all the files. I'll see which one is actually the most accurate, and then that's the one I'll probably upload, just because I'm a little type A with that. So that's for me, where the quick edit thing, I'm basically deleting all those activities, and then I'll actually upload the one that I'm like happy with, and then so go from there. So, and then have you had an experience with the AI features quite yet? Because I know that I think that was just rolled out for like your account just recently, right? I've been using it since Strava Camp, but I don't know, like there's been like, I think like 1 out of 10 rides or activities where I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting data, but for the rest of them, I'm not really sure like how useful it is at this point.
It's not. So like for me, everyone, I'm just pulling up my ride right now. So like right now, so I just went off on this ride, and this was 40 minutes long, roughly, just a simple loop around the Amstel and back to gather some footage for this Ruby thing I'm doing. And so The athlete intelligence for this simple ride was your recent ride showed a significant increase in speed compared to your 30-day average, indicating your training is paying off with improved fitness. No, like factually no. So here's why this is wrong. Because one, it wasn't that fast. I was actually going pretty slow. But two, is because it was flat, right? So all of my rides in the last 30 days have been in rather hilly terrain and or gravel rides. Thus, this is not, the second part of this isn't true, indicating your training is paying off with improved fitness. It's not. It just indicates that I was on flat terrain as opposed to being on the hills for every other ride I've had in the last 30 days.
Exactly. Yep.
Like, and this is the one I just pulled up on demand right now from a few minutes ago. Like, to me, I think eventually, like, I feel like Strava is like many companies that they had to do something with AI. They had to like check the box, right? And they did this, and I think like the athlete intelligence name is clever. Kudos there. No pun intended. But no part of any of the activities I've seen has been useful at all. It's all just regurgitating half incorrect stuff. I feel like it's like the worst of Chat GPT, basically.
Yeah. No, I think related to that, actually, funny enough, one of the AI descriptions that it spat back at me where I thought that was actually kind of, I don't want to say useful, but it was interesting information to know, was it did say that your ride, and this was a couple of weeks ago, that this was the highest average speed that you've had in X amount of days or something like that. And then it made me actually look at my average speed. I'm like, oh, it actually was, so it didn't have anything related to do with fitness, which is good, just because speed is, there's all these other factors, of course, just like, flat terrain and so forth. But I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And so I was a little pleased with that. But, then like my ride yesterday that I have the screenshot pulled up right now, but, they have the athlete intelligence for the different particular sections of data, like heart rate. So this one, so basically my average heart rate was 140. My max heart rate was 159. The athlete intelligence description says average heart rate of 140, max of 159, pushed into higher zones. So I don't know. I feel like, I just, you're right. I think it's like they just kind of had to do something with AI. I noticed on either a Reddit thread or a Twitter thread or something like that about AI, and one person suggested, like, why didn't they use AI to suggest ride titles? And I think that would be like amazing. I know there's a couple other services out there that kind of suggest titles for you, but they're kind of quirky and funny and maybe like not really related to what you actually did. But I think that could be a good, useful feature for AI with Strava.
Totally. Yeah, or another similar sort of thing, like let me upload my 25 photos from the ride, and maybe it's just me that takes too many stupid photos, but let me upload my 25 photos from the ride into Strava and have it pick what it thinks are the best 2 or 3 photos to be the ones that I include in my Strava activity, right? Like, and it can discard the rest to save themselves on storage or whatever the case is. But like, there's so many options there to just make those, like, to make the whole thing better, right? And it's not providing any value at all right now, other than just random text that may or may not be correct. And when you click the More tab to see more information, usually it just doubles down on that badness. It's just, yeah. But we can talk about some positive things, though, when we want to get to that point, by the way. We have a few more positive things we can talk about. But I don't want to stop this train. If this train's moving, we can keep on going, I guess.
No, I think the AI train is probably, I think it's probably about done. But I think that, hopefully they're going to be putting more resources into some of the other, bigger issues, obviously, like the ride creation versus AI at this point. So I think I'm actually particularly interested in this leaderboard cleanup that you mentioned here, because I didn't look into this one either. And so I'm really interested to hear what's going on with this, though.
Yep. So there's a bunch of different cleanup activities going on. I think all of these are good things. So the first one, we'll start with leaderboard cleanup. This is probably the easiest one. They said they're introducing a new upgraded auto flagging systems, and you can now expect to see, quote, 33% fewer impossible efforts on cycling leaderboards. They go on to say, we know that 33% isn't 100%, but it will mean many millions, that's their word, of illegitimate efforts will be removed from the leaderboards. And so they've implemented the segments we've implemented this system on segments in the past, but this time the auto detection will also be gradually applied to older activities. This way, we'll be able to remove past impossible efforts from leaderboards. So in the coming weeks, you may see yourself move up the leaderboards. Congrats. And then there's some FAQs, which are probably valid to note. They say, why do I still see incorrect efforts in my favorite leaderboard? And they point out the obvious, because there are billions of activities that need to be checked to catch all the legitimate ones. So this is going to take a while. And then you can, what if I still see some problematic stuff? You can go ahead and basically do a flag like before. And then they go on to say, why can Strava only catch 33% of legitimate efforts and not 100%? And they say that it takes a nuanced approach to automatically differentiate between an e-bike ride, a slow-moving car, or a human-powered ride, and I'm working towards perfecting that process.
I have still always felt like there needs to be a minimum threshold to get to the top of the leaderboard, in terms of like, you must have heart rate, for cycling, you must have power, something along those lines. And I know I know power meters are not accessible for everyone out there, but at the same time, I think there needs to be like a minimum threshold of like the quality of the data that's being fed in to like get into the top of the leaderboard.
So that then goes probably to the next topic, which is interesting, and maybe we can circle back into how these two become related. So as part of this cleanup effort, they're doing a segment decluttering. So the first bit is that there are 610,000 duplicate segments around the world, according to Strava, and they're doing more to prevent new duplicate segments being created. So the idea being that even though they've now removed 2/3 segments, they want to go ahead and basically minimize duplicate segments being created going forward. They say that if they remove the segments, they're only removing the duplicates, and that your stars and goals will remain on those segments. And then they go on to say, they kind of go down through a bunch of other like achievement stuff and whatnot. But one of the things they're introducing with this is verified segments. They will now verify certain segments. So they talk an example being Alpe d'Huez in France, that are like major segments that, people in either that area or just globally would recognize as this should be the segment, right? Because if you look at Alpe d'Huez, I'm sure there is probably like 500 segments up to Alpe d'Huez in some way, shape, or form, right? And some of them are just because there are logical different portions of that climb, right? I mean, yes, the vast majority of the people go from the bottom to the top and then call it done. But there are cases where people want to go to turn number X or turn number Y, right, of the number of turns that you go up the hill. And certainly there's plenty of climbs elsewhere where you may have one climb all the way up a canyon to the very top, but then another climb just goes halfway, right? And so there's valid overlapping climbs. But they're going to try to go ahead and introduce these verified segments. You can actually see a verified little logo of sorts next to a segment. So it's just a little Strava checkbox kind of circle icon thing next to a given segment. And then they say that they will determine these segments based on the number of favorited segments out there. So right now there are currently 500 verified segments around the world, which is just like, to do simple math here, absolutely nothing, right? So if you think about it, we talked about this in the past. I always play the state game, right? So you have 50 states, so you take whatever number you have and divide it in. This means there's only 10 verified segments per US state if we ignore the rest of the world, right? So like, you can think of 10 notable Strava segments in Colorado in Boulder for that matter, in a matter of seconds, right?
Yeah.
So now you try to scale this around the world. I don't know how well this will scale. I think it's going to be tough unless you really rely on the community, which is something they could definitely do. Maybe if they hadn't killed the forums, but they could definitely do this to go ahead and use those stars as the way to really drive what people think is the most important segment. But I don't know about you. Like, for me, I don't star a lot of segments anymore unless it's something I really want to hit. I'm just going to go ahead and it's going to automatically push into the things I have.
I don't star segments much at all either anymore. Like I do have like, again, like kind of like my favorite segments that, I do actually have some sort of chance of actually getting a legitimate KOM on that. Like I do want to actually pop up on, one of my devices to actually show that segment. They have already done a good job at hiding a lot of the duplicate segments. So you can't see this on mobile, but you can see this on desktop. So if you go to your activity and then you just scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see a little show hidden segments. And those are generally the duplicate segments that maybe aren't as popular or maybe aren't as starred I'm not sure how those get hidden, but you'll definitely see a lot of those duplicate segments there.
So just for fun, while we were chattering about that, I pulled up the Alpduas segment, right?
Yeah.
That they had linked to in their post. They gave two examples, and they linked to those in their Strava PR post. So I pulled that up, and then I found my most recent PR on that from a couple years back, I guess 9 years back. And then I clicked on that ride, and then I looked at all the segments on that ride as I scroll down. Number one, Alpe d'Huez as a proper segment doesn't show at the top of the list. So like their one example doesn't show. And then two, setting that one example aside, like the example they give of arguably maybe the most famous climb in the world, I don't know.
Yeah.
On this one climb, I have to scroll through, it looks like maybe 120, 130 duplicate segments of some way, shape, or form. Like
Wow.
bend 2 to bend 3, bend, like all this sort of stuff. And then it goes on to say, hide another 213 hidden efforts. It literally says, quote, hide 213 hidden efforts. Why would I hide them if they're already, anyways? And then 213 more duplicates and just garbage segments, right? Literally like split 3 to turn 5 and all this sort of stuff.
I wonder why these segments do get duplicated a lot of the time, like, in terms of like, maybe it is like a specific start point and end point that they want to hit versus something else. I'm not sure.
Yeah. What's funny is I just actually found the real Slim Shady Alpe d'Huez in the hidden list. So I will screen record this just because I want to show how ridiculous this is. Down roughly 180 or so segments down, I found the actual Alpe d'Huez segment in the list without any meaningful markings whatsoever that it's the actual verified segment. So despite being the verified segment, it doesn't bubble to the top. I don't get it.
Yeah.
But I like the, don't get me wrong, Strava. I like the concept of verified segments.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kudos on that. I like the idea of using stars somehow as a way to bubble that up. But
I mean, again, like, going back to the fact that, anyone can create a segment for these things. So I think it's going to be up to the users as well to, maybe use a little bit more discretion in terms of like creating new segments, not just, something, extremely specific like that. But yeah.
So here's your fun trivia for the day. What device do you think I used to upload to this activity of Alpe d'Huez in 2015? June 2015.
2015. Oh my gosh, that was 11 years ago. I'm going to say an Edge 500.
Nope. According to Strava, this is wrong, by the way. According to Strava, I used a quote Edge 205.
Oh my gosh.
Which I did not. I've never actually owned an Edge 205. The first Edge that I got in on was the Edge 705. Okay. And I'm looking at the photos from that day because I had a blog on it way back when. And it does indeed look like the Edge 705 there. So not quite sure why, how the database behind the scenes got mixed up, but so more blast from the past, by the way. So this Alpe d'Huez trip, this day that I was down there, was for a product launch, not a Garmin project launch, but a Polar product launch. It was for the announcement of the Polar M450 GPS cycling computer. So it's been almost 15 years since they got in and then almost immediately got out of the bike and computer game. I remember that day so clearly because they brought a huge, we'll link to this post down below because it's really fascinating, like little time capsule. You can see how many people, they brought all these media people down to Alpe d'Huez for this and did this ride. It was an epic ride of both the main climb as well as kind of around the entire, like the backside climb, if you will, but descending down that. But I remember so clearly the moment where we sat in a room with all these media journalists, and these were all like back in the names of like big name media entities in cycling, like Bicycling Magazine and things like that, right? All the names that you used to know back in the day. And I remember the moment when someone asked, I already knew the answer to this question, so I wasn't going to ask it again. They asked, is there Ant Plus on this bike computer? And this is 2015, right? So this is like the heyday of Ant Plus when there was really only Ant Plus power meters at the time. And they said, no, there's no ANT plus. And they went on to explain that they didn't see a future in ANT plus, which long term, decade plus, sure. And I remember so clearly is all these like very not technically savvy cycling, journalists were actually like on the board of the train of, wait a minute, you're introducing a bike computer that has no ANT plus to a world of almost entirely ANT plus ANT plus power meters. And it was just this like, and that was almost the death of that bike computer before it even got started. Because back in that day, you couldn't do that. Today, of course you can introduce a bike computer without ANT plus and it'll be just fine. It won't be good because you won't have access to things like, I won't say it will be just fine. It'll struggle, right? Because it won't have ANT plus radar. It won't have some of those sensors. You can introduce a watch without ANT plus, as we've seen Apple do and Suunto do and Coros do, but a bike computer, even in 2024, you can't introduce without ANT plus. And so back in that day, yeah.
It's funny though. It's like that's still a question that absolutely pops up on media calls. Like in the last couple of years too. It's like it's like, oh, so does this have ANT plus? And it's so funny. Like a lot of time, if it doesn't, from whatever particular company that is, they're just like, oh god, like FML, like kind of.
Yep.
I can't believe you asked this. I can't believe you asked this question, but I know you were going to ask this question.
Yeah. I think it's again, it's just, especially and today I would say the reasoning why it matters is different than the past, right? In the past, it mattered mostly for power meter support and older sensor support. I think today it matters mostly for radar, to be honest. Is probably the biggest driver. I think, most power meters made in the last, not all power meters that have been made in the last 8-9 years have dual ANT plus and Bluetooth Smart. Again, back in 2015, that meant that was just coming into the forefront to have a dual ANT plus and Bluetooth power meter. A lot of companies still only making ANT plus power meters back then. And of course, you typically had a power meter that was around for ideally 5-7 years, right? So, that in that case, people would have had older power meters that weren't compatible anymore with this new unit. But yeah, it's anyways, that was my little time capsule blast from the past.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. That's probably everything that we have to talk about on today's episode. But yeah, I think I think we do have some interesting stuff to talk about for the next episode, whenever that's going to be. I think it's maybe a week or two. We'll have to see whenever that comes up. But yeah, there's some interesting stuff to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. The new device season is not over yet. It's still chugging along.
No, definitely not. So yeah, and so anyways, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is where you can get all our pretty faces and some pretty B-roll and stuff like that in the background. You can also switch over to YouTube Music if you want to just do the audio version of it as well. And then we're also available on Spotify podcasts as well as Apple Podcasts.
Man, you just did the whole thing. I don't have more to say other than like, see you later.
See you later.
Really. Yep. Thanks all for listening.
Thanks.
Have a good one.